Hey guys, today's episode is my conversation with Harry Gilbert. He's a true expert of the tennis industry and he shared some amazing insights with us and things that he has learned in his 40 years in the industry. In this amazing episode, he explains how the customer may not always be right, but you can quote unquote let them be right. His belief in hiring attitude and training the rest, and being relentlessly positive on and off the court. I love that. I had so much fun talking with Harry, I didn't even realize the time. If you're enjoying the podcast, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening from. You can follow Vita Tennis on social media, on Facebook as Vita Tennis and on Instagram as Vita Tennis Podcast. Learn from one of the best out there, only here at Vita Tennis. Enjoy! Hello, everybody. Welcome to Vita Tennis, the podcast for those of us who eat, sleep, breathe tennis. I'm Jennifer Gelhaus, and today I'm talking with Harry Gilbert. Harry will be serving his 25th season as the director of tennis at the Waccabuc Country Club in New York. He's an experienced consultant and search executive in the racquets industry, and he is currently a partner in Simmard Enterprises. Harry served at world-class facilities as the executive director of tennis at a luxury resort community in the Bahamas called Albany. He was the director of tennis at Hammock Beach Resort in Palm Coast, Florida, and also director of tennis at Plantation Bay, also here in Florida. Harry served as USPTA Florida president for 3 years and president for USPTA National for 2 years. He has over 40 years of expertise in the private club, resort, and tennis industry, and I'm so excited to talk with him today. Welcome, Harry, to Vita Tennis. I know this is the short version of your bio, but did I get it mostly right?
Hi, Jennifer. Thanks so much for having me. And you got it 100% right. I do have 40 plus years, which makes me experienced / old. But yes, that's 100% accurate.
Well, I plan on exploiting those 40 years of experience in 1 hour talk with you. So We'll see where we go here. But let's start at the beginning. I would love to hear how you first got into teaching tennis. And did you ever imagine you would have such an amazing career in the tennis industry?
Like probably a lot of folks in the tennis business, I played tennis and I was playing in school and I got a summer job. And I was at a country club in Albany Beach, Florida, where I'm from. And I worked the summer doing the juniors mostly and court maintenance, just cutting my teeth on learning about the tennis business. And I really enjoyed it. So the next year I did it again. And then ironically, at a very young age, I was 21, the director of that club in Albany Beach lost his job. And they actually reached out to myself and another young man who I'd worked with that summer and offer us the opportunity to become co-directors, which was kind of crazy, right? At 21 years old. So I took that opportunity and I didn't look back. I was a senior in college and I had to convince my parents that I would go back. I had been accepted in the master's program. I was going to get a master's in sports psychology. And I envisioned myself being a professor or a college instructor and a college coach. That was my kind of plan, I loose plan. But then I took this job and my parents were supportive, which I thought was interesting considering I was leaving school with a semester left. And then I haven't looked back, but I did go back and get that college degree years later. So yeah, I did that mostly for them because I changed. I was a physical education major and I switched to a business degree and I got it in my 30s actually. But I did finish that primarily so my parents would know that I said what I did what I said I was going to do. But that's how I got started. I just teaching very low entry level teaching position. And then it kind of blossomed from there with a great opportunity, arguably before I was ready. That was definitely throw him in the water and see if he could swim. But it worked out.
That's so smart of you to get a business degree. That's one of the things that I wish I had done. I have a research background. I study biochemistry. And wow. I'm just like, why did I do that? I did go into research. That was the plan, to go into research, master's, PhD, the whole path. And then realized along that path that I wanted to teach tennis. And it took a while. It almost took permission from my sister I had to talk to my sister, and she was like, well, if you like tennis, why don't you do that? And it was like, yeah, why don't I just do that?
Right,
It was crazy. It's like I needed her permission because my mom would for sure freak out. And yeah, it was like a whole thing, they didn't really see teaching tennis as a career, really, or never thinking that we'd be able to do what we do now. And a lot of people don't really understand that part.
Well, and you're much younger as well, but like in my peer group, many of us, if you were playing for a college team, a lot of us sort of imagine ourselves in tennis. Maybe we didn't know exactly whether we were going to be a teaching pro, a high performance coach, maybe a college coach, school teams, or work outside of the court, maybe as an executive or work for one of the companies, racket companies, ball company, et cetera. But it seems to have changed. And now, because I actually talked to a group of my students like 4 years ago, and I asked them if any of them saw a viable career for themselves in tennis. And these are kids that love tennis. And for the most part, it was no. I don't know if they think it's too hard to work, because we do know at the beginning it's a lot of effort and work. Maybe they don't think there's enough of a reward. I'm not sure. But it doesn't seem to be the career path now for good tennis players that it was when I was younger.
Yeah, for sure. I just didn't even think about it. Honestly, I didn't think that it was a job that I could have. I don't know if I thought that maybe you had to be, top 100 player to be able to teach tennis. I don't know. Until I finally started coaching college and then opened my eyes to doing lessons and doing other things. And I realized, hey, this is great. I'd much rather be doing this than being in the lab.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the passion, I mean, one thing for sure in that I knew is I love sport, because I played baseball as well as a young man. I love sport and I love people. So if I was able to kind of blend where I could be around people and sport, it would work. And like I said, my loose plan was to be a college coach. And I assumed a professor, because that's what you do unless you're a full-time coach. But this worked out a lot better. But I think if someone had asked me in high school if I was going to be involved with sport for my life, I think I would have said yes. I wouldn't have known how or why. But I've always been in sport, and I love people. So it is a pretty good mix and marriage, I guess, for me.
Yeah. And what has been your favorite thing about your job?
No question, it's the relationships with the members and the people. Because I am, a bit senior, I've been able to teach some families for 3 generations. I started out maybe here at Waccabuc teaching, a mother and their children, and their children maybe were 14 then, but then they grew up, and now 25 years later, they're 39. They have their own little children who now have joined the club. So there's 3 generations. But I still enjoy. I love being on the court, but just as importantly, I like being with the people. So running a successful program could look like a day here where it's a Saturday and there's all the courts are full and 3 or 4 courts of lessons, and I'm not on the court, but I'm interacting with all the people. I'm sort of managing it, just being with people, and so that's what I like the best, without question. The relationships I have, I'm still friendly with kids. Well, they're not kids now, for gosh sakes, with young adults that I taught when, 25, 30 years ago. And now as young adults, we stay in touch. So it's for sure the relationships with the people that I've impacted. That's the most gratifying for me.
And what do you think has been the key to your success and in your career advancement? Because you've been at some incredible clubs and you've been able to be there for a really long time. So I think that speaks for itself.
Thanks for that. And it's funny, I didn't know what questions you were going to ask, but I thought that might be one. And it just popped in my head what I would answer. It's passion, for sure. It's passion for the sport, passion for people. And I have a real passion for service. I really do want to provide the highest level of service. And it's something that I kind of study and check for best practices and try and learn from, particularly resorts and restaurants. Because as you and I know, and everyone knows, resorts and restaurants rely on daily customers coming and going, coming back, where you could make a case a little bit for us as tennis coaches, tennis pros, that our members, if they have a great experience, they're going to be thrilled. If they have an average experience, they're not going to necessarily leave. They're not going to leave. They're not going to go to another club and try to, we maybe didn't give them a great experience, but they're not leaving. Where if you have a bad meal, you're not going back to that restaurant. They've got that one shot. A resort has one opportunity for your stay to make it special. So you'll continue to come back. So I find that the hospitality business is very interesting to me, and I study it, and I try and provide the extras wherever I can for the members and my students and in my employees. I just try and provide great service to everyone around me. So I think passion for what I do, passion for the sport, passion for being with people, and a real interest and passion about hospitality and customer service.
Absolutely. It's a lot easier, not easier, but more important, I guess, to focus on retaining a member, right, than acquiring a new one. So it's not just providing a one-time great experience, but being consistent with that. And I think that's the challenge, right, is to do an excellent job day in and day out and continue to provide excellent service in everything that you do. What do you think is the key to excellent customer service?
Recognizing, well, there's two parts. There's providing it, and then when you fall short, how you recover, right? Because we're all going to make some mistakes. So the first one is really trying to plan a great experience. Make sure that if it's a tennis lesson, you're on time, the balls are in good shape, you have a plan, the court, all the little things, and then do your job, and it'll come together nicely. So it just depends though on what you're doing each day and how you're trying to provide that great service. If it's something that you can control, like that lesson, you just plan and execute. However, if something goes wrong, that's where the recovery comes in. Mm-hmm. And I'm actually just doing a customer service presentation. I'm putting it together. I'm presenting at USPTA Eastern next weekend on customer service. And, I reference the Ritz-Carlton hotels, which are really known for their service. I restaurant Danny Meyer and his Union Square Hospitality here in New York City, which used to be fine dining, but now, of course, they own Shake Shack, and everyone knows Shake Shack. And he wrote a book. There's a men's store here in Greenwich, Connecticut that wrote a book called Hug Your Customer. And all these companies and individuals talk about what they can do with their customers. And they also talk about what happens if you do fall short, how you have to recognize you've made a mistake, acknowledge it, own it, and then try and repair maybe the relationship or offer something. Like I learned a lot. I've been in the private club business all my life, but as you referenced, I left my winter job, which was a country club community, and took a job at a brand new resort called Hammock Beach. And they modeled a lot of what they did after Ritz-Carlton, our service standards, et cetera, et cetera. So I really learned a lot about hospitality there. And we were, as a manager, we had once a month, we had to be the manager on duty, which means we were in charge we were like the GM, the acting GM for that. And you learn a lot about service recovery when you're in charge of all the outlets. So, for example, on a Tuesday evening, I was the MOD, and I could be in charge of 2 restaurants, the spa, which was still open, of course, tennis courts if there was evening play, and every part of the resort except really for golf, because in the evening, of course, the golf was closed. And we'd have to deal with situations where a bad meal, a complaint in the restaurant, which maybe got past the restaurant manager to us. Something was wrong with the room, someone come to the front desk with a problem. So I learned how to manage those relationships, to listen for sure. You have to listen, understand what they're saying. Sometimes they just want you to hear them. They're not looking for something. But when they are, you have to find the balance between just giving stuff away, but doing the right thing to manage that situation. And that's one thing that I learned, and I'll give you a quick example. We noticed because the resort business does a lot of surveys, as you probably know, and anyone who's listening. When you check out of a hotel, you have an opportunity to fill out a customer card if you choose, or maybe they send it online. So we found if you had a perfectly normal stay, you went for a weekend, with a significant other, with your friends, everything was fine. Nothing maybe extraordinary, but it was just fine. you would rate let's just say the average, I can't remember exactly, but the average score would be an 88 to 90, right? But if something went wrong, not crazy wrong, but if you had one situation that allowed us at the resort to fix this, we were consistently rated higher. And I thought that was fascinating. So say one thing about your reservation or something about your room wasn't right, and then the resort repaired that relationship or repaired that mistake or fixed that mistake, you might say, we scored higher. And I remember, and that sunk in with me, and I've told that story a bunch of times. I used it in my presentation about customer service. And I jokingly say maybe we should mess stuff up a little bit so we can fix it and get a better score, which of course would be silly. But it is interesting that the customer will understand if you make a mistake and will be thrilled if you remedy it in a fashion that they think is at least satisfactory or above. So a long answer to, I try and provide it day in and day out. And when we do have a miss, which we don't have that many because we're ahead of most situations, we work hard to remedy it because, we have, in my tennis pro orientation, the first thing on there is the answer is always yes. So if you start from there and just find a way to get to that yes for the customer, you're going to be fine.
So do you think the customer is always right?
The answer is always yes until it's no. And since it's never really no, but occasionally it's sometimes I can't provide that, Miss Galhouse, and here's why. So I don't know. I don't. And one thing you have to remember, and particularly, I think my members are a little different than a customer at a resort too, because you would see the occasional thing at Hammock Beach in particular, Albany, the one I worked at in the Bahamas, very, very high end. Not much of this, but like at Hammock Beach, occasionally you could tell that the guest was kind of trying to kind of get over a little bit, right? Like even in my last couple of years, it didn't happen to me specifically, but I would hear about stories where a guest would come to the front desk, mention, I'm going to do something on Yelp if you don't do something. So that's like almost kind of holding you hostage, So yeah. I would say that guest or that customer is not right, yet you still have to find the balance. But you do have to listen. That's what it comes down to. And, those of us who are in the business, we know members particularly like something about team tennis. Members are going to be dissatisfied about their experience with their captain, with their place in the lineup, with this or that. And I mentioned team tennis in my customer service presentation because even though we all kind of dread certain parts about it, team tennis is a big lifeblood of clubs. You really have to be a supporter and an advocate of it. When we're together as tennis pros, we can go, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe what happened here or there. But you have to support things like that and just find the way to make that member, if she comes in with a bad experience, you want to listen. That's number one. Have plenty of time for her. And then try and solve it. But occasionally, to get back to your actual answer, the members aren't always right. But if you can put yourself in their shoes and see why they're feeling what they're feeling, why they have that specific complaint, you can at least commiserate with them and let them know you understand it. But sometimes, you're not going to be able to solve it. It's not like if, the racket broke the fourth day they used it, you just replace it and move on. That's easy, right? Yeah. But if it's a little different, something like that. But that's a good question because the member isn't always right, but their ability to come to you with a complaint is always right because they're not satisfied and you want them to be satisfied.
So what would you say, do you have any strategy, for example, if a member comes to you and you instantly know that you cannot help them, that their request is maybe too crazy or that they're in the wrong? Do you have any strategy? Like what's the first thing that you would do in that case? Anything?
Let me answer that with a little story, and then I'll try to answer the question. At Hammock Beach, I had a great head pro named Gene Paul Escano, who when I left, and I don't know if you'll ever hear this, but he's the director now, has done a fabulous job, really good. But when he first got there, someone would come in with a complaint that was 100% out of left field. It just wasn't right. They'd say something. He'd go, Harry, they're not right. Here's what I go, I understand. And he make his point impassioned, Harry, this is the thing. We're not going to do that. I just let him sort of vent a little bit. And I'd say, this is the line that I use. Let them be right. And he'd go, but they're not right. It's wrong. I go, I know, but let them be right. Because if you let them be right, even if they're wrong, then you come out ahead of the game, So I learned that early. I think my staff, because your staff wants to do a good job and they work super hard. So when they know they're right, it's sometimes you have to make sure that they don't become combative. They don't want to, because sometimes you just want to say, look, Mrs. Smith, you're wrong, and here's why. Can't do that. You have to let them be right and then find a way. Now, that was the story. And remind me of the other part of the question.
No, just real quick. This reminds me of a sign that I have here, actually, in my kitchen that says, happy wife, happy life.
Right, exactly.
So it's kind of that same concept is, let her or let the members, I guess, in this case, let them think that they're right.
Right.
And then address it. But
and we actually say that. I mean, we jokingly say it now because on the same lines, and I gave you the story. I'm not positive I answered the question. I apologize. But one other time I had a member come to me and complain. I don't remember what it was. And she immediately went above my head to the GM at Hammock Beach, right?
Yeah.
And the GM 100% shut her down. Like, just shut her down. Called me and said, Mrs. Such and Such came in. We're not doing that. Don't worry about that. That's dead. And I hung up. And you know how I felt? I felt funny. And I remember this specifically. I appreciated him looking out for me. But see, he didn't let her be right. He told her she was wrong. And now he was the one that did it. I didn't. But it made me feel a little funny. And I remember speaking with Jean Paul about that, going, I wish our GM, his name's Carlton, I wish Carlton had maybe finessed that a little more. Because, if you just say no, then you've sort of damaged the relationship a little bit. So that's something that we say. We do say let them be right. And we'll work towards almost any type of service recovery that we can. Yeah.
So I think you kind of forgot, or you said you maybe forgot the question, but a strategy to, when somebody comes in with something out of left field, what's the first thing you do? Is it take a deep breath? Do you have a line or anything?
Right. Well, that, and apologize for it. Yes, for sure. You let them talk so you can gather yourself too, particularly if they come right in. And the worst, I think everyone listening here who works, I like to say across the desk, you're at the desk, the counter, the pro shop, and somebody comes in. The worst thing is to be surprised. And I definitely have on my tennis pro orientation as well. I have a thing, bring everything to me, no matter how small. That's literally how it's written down. Because the worst thing you want, which has happened to me, is I get a phone call and it's Miss Gelhaus. Hey, Harry, I just want to let you know that Billy's okay. His arm's not broken. This is a weird example. I go, okay, thanks for calling. I'm glad he's fine. We'll see him tomorrow then, right? And then I hang up. I immediately go, what the heck? What happened? And then somebody will say, oh, he fell down. I will say, you have to know that. You have to know ahead of time. You have to know what happened, even if it's the worst thing ever. Well, not the worst, but I mean, I had a child that, believe it or not, my pro was doing an example with his racket. He hit a child in the face. That's not good, right? That's not good. And I found out about it. They told me, but he downplayed it a little bit. And then the member wasn't angry, but she certainly wanted to know why he was demonstrating near that child's head. So it was a mistake of managing the court, et cetera. So, but to answer your question all the way back, strategy, it's always to listen and maybe I don't want to say it like this, but to buy time. Like if they come in and you weren't expecting it, you have to know that you need to gather yourself as well, right? Like if you see an altercation on a court, if you see a team match where there's no chemistry, and then later in the day, one of the two people in that court come in, you know what they're going to talk about. They're going to talk about why they were with that partner or whatever. So the strategy is to listen and then to really try and put yourself, in a position where you can find a way. And sometimes it's better to take all the information and let them know that you'll get back to them. You don't want to make a decision right then. Like you certainly can't say, well, you don't have to play with her anymore, or I'll talk to the captain. You might say, I'll speak to the captain and let her know how you're feeling about it, and we'll try and come to a solution. So strategies, first thing is make sure you know as much as you can so you're not surprised. And the second one is, spend time listening while you can gather yourself too. Because it hasn't happened very often, but once or twice in my career, someone's lost their temper. And then you don't know how to, and not actually at me, but what had just happened. And then now they're going to either blame me or expect me to do something right away. Mm-hmm. And that'll throw you off. You're having a perfectly normal day. And then Mr. or Mrs. such and such burst through the door. And whoa, so I guess that's the strategy is to try and know ahead of time. And if it catches you by surprise, listen.
Yeah, it's so tricky. And I think that just comes with experience. I mean, and being put in difficult situations, because we can get ourselves in some really tricky situations in the tennis world. I think sometimes tennis can bring out the worst in people, especially when there's a competition, right? I was doing a lesson with this older gentleman one time, and just a funny story real quick. And it was him, it was his grandson, who's like 18 years old, could definitely rip the ball. And this guy, I mean, he's like 70 something, 80 something, older gentleman, right? And he got 2 pros. He got this girl who was a top ranked WTA player.
Oh, wow.
And myself, and we're playing doubles, right?
Doubles, yeah, sure.
So we're playing, and basically you had to hit it. We were all, hitting at a good pace, but when you hit it to him, you had to go soft. And he was playing with the top WTA player. I was playing with his grandson. And Harry, he was at the net, and I hit it towards him, and I hit him. I hit him right in the chest. And you know what he did? I was at the net, actually. I hit a ball back at him, and I accidentally hit him. You know what he did? He threw his racket across the net at me.
At you. Ooh.
So, there wasn't that many people there watching, but the people that were watching were like gasping for air, like, oh, sure. That just happened, and that happened to be like my boss's day off. I was, I did not know how to handle that. I just kind of like looked down, and I think he felt uncomfortable. I think I just kind of brushed it off, but I didn't even know how to react. I actually didn't even realize that he had thrown his racket across the net towards me, because when I hit him, I looked down and I was apologizing. So I didn't realize that he threw his racket until I saw his racket right next to me. Like, he didn't hit me with it.
Which is good, because that would have been another level of weirdness.
Yeah, exactly. He actually didn't hit me with it. But I mean, obviously, some anger issues there. But that was an interesting one.
Yeah, and that could have gone a bunch of ways. Maybe if you just kind of soothed it over right then, nothing. But also, if he had hit you, or if a member, or a committee member, or somebody saw it and wanted to make a big deal about it because he broke an obvious rule. Yeah. I don't know. You have to write down, don't throw your racket at the tennis pro. But I mean, it's got to be a violation of something, right? That could have gone a lot of weird ways. Yeah, that's a pretty unique one.
Yeah, I will never forget that. That's for sure.
No, I can imagine for sure. Yeah.
So anyway, you also mentioned surveys. I did want to kind of follow up on that, because I really believe in surveys. I think they're wonderful, even though I get inundated with surveys all the time you buy a sponge on Amazon and you get a survey about it. It's crazy. But I think, like you said, hotels, resorts are very good about it, and it does provide really good feedback. And I have used it at clubs that I've worked at mostly to get some guidance on major decisions regarding programming, capital projects, and things like that. Have you incorporated surveys in your programming at all, or were you using it more for the resort side?
No, that's a great question. And when I work at the resorts, of course, like I said, you get at Hammock Beach what's called a customer service card, and there's a Unifocus, which is a company that measures the statistics of your responses, et cetera, et cetera. And then here at the club at Waccabuc, they just did one, but they don't do them very often, quite frankly. We are kind of in a position right now where we're trying to get a long-range plan. So there was some questions on there about the current program. A lot of it was forward-looking. But what I do is I have an open door policy, of course. I don't really need a survey to find out what's going well and what's not. I can look outside, or stay in here. But what I do is with almost every event, I send a thank you, like an email to let's say we did a member guest and we had 16 teams, so 16 members, 16 guests. I'll send an email to the 16 to the member participants, thanking them. Maybe I thought it was a great event. Congratulations to Jennifer and her partner Stephanie. They played well. Great turnout. Blah blah. Let me know what we can do better. And I want to know that. And you have a sense if the event killed, you'd be surprised if you get much, But once in a while you'll get something. Very rarely do we get anyone offering negative feedback about the event. It's usually about the extras. Can we have a buffet lunch instead of off the menu? Because we were in a hurry. The tournament was long, but not too long, but whatever. So I tend to try and get feedback immediately and specifically. Like I don't really want to say, hey, how was your summer? That's not going to do me any good. But if we run a pro-am, if we run a member guest, if we run, well, we do all those. And then I ask questions after that. We just did a camp and we just did a thank you. And because we changed the format sometimes we do it more station driven, other times. And so just stuff like that. I'm not ever concerned about, is someone not going to like me? Is someone not going to like the staff? Do they not? I'd rather know.
Yeah.
So I'm not to say I'm a fan of surveys is not really accurate. I'm a fan of feedback. So wherever I can get it, I want it. And so I do little, not little, but I do specific to events and things like that. The club, like I said, did one this year, but to the best of my knowledge, we haven't done one in like 10 years at least before that. And resorts, like they're constantly getting the feedback from their guests. Yeah. Now, both resorts that I worked at, they had members as well, so in Hammock Beach, I remember now, Hammock Beach does an annual survey now that I think about it. And that was useful, but they didn't dig in too deep to tennis because, they had a lot of other stuff to concern themselves with. But I do find the information that we get from it helpful for sure.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. I think a lot of people are afraid of the feedback. They're afraid that they're going to look bad or, that someone's going to just say something bad about them. And I think whether it's good or it's bad, you're going to learn from it because now
Right. And no one wants the third comment to be, Harry's lazy. Harry's never there, which of course are not true, either of those two. You don't want that. But I do know also our GM would at Hammock Beach, I never got anything like that, but if you guys say negative, he would sometimes say, look, we know who that was and don't even worry. You could tell somebody had a bad experience at the restaurant, and then the survey had to be a month later. They complained about, the restaurant staff. But yeah, I do want feedback anywhere I can get it.
I know you work with consulting firms, and for yourself, for your own clubs, you've hired, I can imagine how many people, how many pros you've hired along the way. What do you think that you've seen so far is the most important thing to look for when hiring a tennis pro?
Attitude. Hire attitude and train them. Now, everyone that comes to me is a good player. They're a college player or were a college player, or maybe occasionally they're not, but they know tennis. I'm certain that they know how to feed, they know how to do drills, et cetera, et cetera. But I strongly believe, and the information that I found in the hospitality side, because if you think about it, if you're at a Michelin star restaurant in New York City and you're going to hire a server, you don't necessarily need a server who's been at 4 other restaurants and is a pain in the ass, thinks that, those other 4 know how to do it better than your restaurant. You want a higher attitude, a service-oriented person, someone that loves people and wants to be in front. And then you'll train them at that restaurant. Same thing here. We have the way we do our coaching. I think the term, I don't have the orientation in front of me, but it says within the parameters of acceptable technique. It says, like, if somebody wants to teach a semi-Western and someone wants to teach a little bit towards an Eastern from a semi-Western, that's fine, right? And go do it. Do what you do. We want them to to learn to teach and coach the way we do. But much more importantly, we want them to be a genuine people person, to be a hard worker. We have 5 things that we look for, and I can tell you what they are if you're interested. I just have to look them up to make sure, because they change. And we had 5 things that we told the hires this year were about, and I should know them off the top of my head, but I just want to look to be sure. And attitude, teamwork, hard work, communication, and service. Those are the 5 pillars. And it changed it this year, to be honest with you. That's why I couldn't pull it off the top of my head, because we didn't think we had the best teamwork last year, even though that should always be on there. So we rewrote these in no particular order, but attitude is first, as you see. Teamwork, because as you know, in the summer season, we're all working crazy hard. We're right on top of each other. You have to be a team player. Hard work is self-explanatory, communication, and service. So those are the 5 things that matter the most to us, with attitude being number 1. If you can check those 5 boxes, you'll be a successful pro, and you'll probably be successful in anything else you try and do. So when I bring in, this year we have 2 new pros, and when we get here in the orientation, one thing I tell them is, if you want to be in the tennis business, you can learn from me. I've been here at it for 40 plus years. My head pro's been with me for 15 years, and she's been in the business for 25, I think. My other pro is on his 5th year, and then one other 3, and then the 2 new ones. But we tell them what they can learn from us will help them for sure if they want to be in the tennis business. You know, like a lot of veteran men and women who are directors for a long time. I have a lot of my staff that are out on their own now as directors, and I can help them get jobs. They want to go to Florida. I know a million pros. They want to stay up here, et cetera, et cetera. But just as importantly, I can pick out 4 or 5 guys, one particularly, who left the industry but took some of the things that we did. He got a job with the ATP, worked himself up to marketing director and living in Monte Carlo, which is a pretty good gig for the ATP. And then 2 years ago, he left to be the global marketing director for Tag Heuer.
Oh, wow.
And 23 years ago, he was a 22-year-old tennis pro here, learning the way I'm not taking credit, he was a bright guy, but what those same things that we do, that I'm sure you do, that people listening do, the way they train their staff, they're training them to be better tennis pros, but also better people, better teammates, better co-workers, probably better in their own relationships outside. If you keep those same 5 things, you can probably apply them to most everything. You know, I mean, think about a relationship: hard work, communication, service is a little weird. We'll leave that one out. But, you know, those things can help you in anything you do. But easy answer, I hire attitude. And that's what we say. If you ask me, I have a little tagline, it's hire attitude and train the rest. And I probably stole that from somebody else.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. How can you tell someone's attitude in the hiring process? Is that more of during the in-person part, or is that based on references, a combination? Do you have anything that you specifically look for because sometimes, you know, everyone can seem like an angel during an interview, right?
Yeah.
And then you have no idea what really their attitude is when they get challenged or when they're tired, you know?
No, that's a good point. And that's a great question. And the answer is, number 1, my network my network weeds out or helps me to identify. They identify candidates. I think I've only hired in 25 years here. So we've hired 40 pros, because, you know, naturally I'm lucky. A lot of them stay multiple years, and we usually have 4 plus myself, sometimes 5. But I think I've only missed once or twice where that not only are they not eligible to be rehired, but if someone called me, I'd struggle to give them a reference, because and usually they're not team players. Mostly they're a little too much out for themselves, because, you know, most tennis pros are former tennis players or current tennis players. They have an ego. They're good. You're a good player. You know, I'm old, but I was an okay player. You know, and we feel pretty good about ourselves because we're athletic, et cetera. So, you know, you have to then see if that translates. And most of the pros that I hire, particularly the younger ones, as you know how the summer gigs are, you check a little bit to see how you check with their coach, their college coach, or, like I said, since I already have a reference, somebody already knows them. And I love it when they're like a captain of their team. It means they have leadership, but I'll ask them questions about what they like the best, what they don't. If they've already been teaching somewhere else for a year or two, I'll ask them what they liked and didn't like, and I'll try and give them a little scenario where maybe just to see how they'd react to a situation. But we work hard to make them successful anyways. So if you come through the door, a hardworking young man or young woman, eager to learn, not so much to learn, oh, Harry, teach me how to be a tennis. Not that, just eager to fit in, to learn what we do and do it with us, you'll be successful. And, we have a great membership here too. The members are they're very supportive of our team. And so it's pretty easy to succeed here, quite frankly.
Well, you've been there so long. I mean, they trust you, they trust who you hire too. So I'm sure anyone you select, they're going to be open to,
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's a good point, because they often say, which is nice, they'll go, Harry, you have somebody, you have your staff with us here, and I'll go, yeah, you're going to like it. I go, oh, yeah, we're not worried about that. We always like them. We know that. I just want, but it isn't easy, because, some years, your network, your first 6 or 7 outreaches to the normal people go, nah. I even have a coach that told me, knows what, because we have pretty high standards. And he goes, I don't have any for you. And he knows what we want, and he has athletes there, but he didn't. And it's funny, because when you have your downline too, which I do now, I can check, particularly because if they're a lot of them are international. So I'll reach out to a guy and say, hey, do you know this man or woman? They're from your country. They're 3 years younger. Oh yeah, they'll be great. Oh no, they'll literally tell me. And it's a little funny, because they become territorial. They become part of the team, and even though they're not here anymore, and they only want someone that'll fit in, that'll be just right. So it's interesting. But no, number one is hire that attitude, and then train them and go from there.
Yeah, that's why word of mouth is so important for these positions, especially for these type of clubs. Your reputation does kind of follow you, and if you show you have a good attitude, you're a team player, all those things, that definitely pays off. But going back to during the interview process, the hiring process, I get so nervous. It might not look like it because I have a podcast and I'm interviewing people all the time, but when I'm the one getting interviewed, I'm like, oh, I freeze. I get so nervous. I don't know why. Eventually, I kind of loosen up a little bit. I kind of feed off of the person interviewing me a little bit. Right. But do you have any advice for candidates when they're interviewing someone like me or anybody?
That's a good question, too. That's a great question, and one thing I do, so it's interesting, because, excuse me, if I prepare them too much, then I'm not getting the real. So if I'm offering advice to someone, it would be yourself, first of all.
Yeah.
Because presumably you've gotten to the interview already, because, there's some groundwork that is in front of that. Be yourself, be genuine, look them in the eye, all the normal stuff that people do that are successful at. But I expect them to be a little nervous, because, like I said, normally it's someone that I know that has talked to them and said, a college coach maybe, or a former pro who knows a college team, and they're from Columbia, and the player we might get is from Columbia. So they've given them an idea. But I expect them to be a little nervous, but they can't just choke, because, honestly, because we're in the people business. If they can't talk to me, and I did have one interview this year. Typically, I don't have that many, because they come pre-qualified, and I already have weeded them through three levels before I have the first interview, right? And then we have to do one in person. So I fly to Florida. I had to go anyways, luckily. And I meet a guy who flies in too. And he was a wonderful young guy, super nice guy, but he was hopelessly underqualified and nervous, like crazy nervous, couldn't look me in the eye. And I just asked a question like, well, here's a scenario. You've got these kids. How are you going to take them through a red ball or whatever? And he was dying. And then I got where I was trying to help him. Now, I had one of my pros with me who knew him. He wasn't his own. He was kind of his recommendation, to be honest. And he was with me. So he's looking at me going, oh, boy. So we really tried to help him. But it was pretty clear he couldn't get the job. He couldn't do the job. So therefore, he couldn't get the job. And I offered some suggestions and tried to put him like in a summer camp that his level and get some experience somewhere because he couldn't do it at a private club. So I would say be yourself, show your personality. But for us, we don't have many people that come in like a typical first interview where they have to, I've already vetted them, 75%. So you can't really, if you get to a personal interview with me for a summer job, for one of these jobs, you have a real good chance of getting it, because you've passed enough tests that we've taken the time, because they're not necessarily where I am geographically. So either you've flown to me or I've flown to you, or we've met somewhere. So neither of us want to go through that trouble.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually.
We're pretty sure it's going to work because I don't want to waste their time. And as you know, and people listening probably know, particularly if they're seasonal, in the spring, you get a bunch of cover letters and resumes just find their way to you from tennisjobs.com or whatever. And those are never really targeted. Therefore, they're not good for me, because if you find out that I have a job and open and you want to apply for it, you can't start out, "Dear sir." Well, can you at least find out who the director is, and find out a little bit about the club. Now, I understand there's so many jobs available that may work for other people. And if I didn't, luckily I didn't have the network where I'm getting candidates, kind of pre-vetted, like I said, I would be interested in that. But then I'm still pretty hard on them, when hard or challenge or whatever. When they send it me, if they don't do a good job, even though they're pre-vetted, I'll go, "Look, here's what I'm looking for in the cover letter. I want you to, or here's what I'm looking for. Tell me how, tell me more about yourself. Tell me what you've done." And they come through. So, and they're going to be a little nervous, it's part of the deal. I'm good communicating. Like we're talking, we've probably been talking 50 minutes. I'm having a great time because I'm comfortable talking tennis, talking service, talking whatever you want to talk about, unless it's something, I'm not qualified. I'd probably take a shot anyways. Mm-hmm. So, I like to help them, just like it comes back to, I'll give you another example. I had a woman who was good, but she wasn't quite the right fit for us. But she was good, but she also had an injury. She wasn't sure. So long story short, I told her it wasn't going to work out this year, but I also said, "I'll be happy to help you." Now, she could have left it there and I would be happy, but she didn't. She was, "I really would like an opportunity." And so I hooked up with Ed Shanafy, who and she's going to work for Ed. But I told him she wasn't 100% pre-vetted because she didn't get far enough with me. She was teaching in an area where one of my former players is a head pro. And I've gotten players from that college team before. So that's kind of how it works, though. And then Ed had to make his own decision, and he chose her, and I was happy for both of them. But I couldn't. Other times I've said, like real quick, like 6 years ago, came down to two great guys in Florida. I took the one. I told the other, "I'm going to help you." I called Rob Caldwell right around the corner at Bedford Golf and Tennis here in New York. I told him, "I've got a guy for you. Do you need him?" He said, "Yeah." So he hired him. Great, worked out perfect. He had 3 good summers. So, I like I said, that's why I don't like to tell people no. That's a bummer, right? So sure. So I only want to interview 3 or 4 for my 2 or 3 jobs. Because like I said, I'm pretty sure they're going to work. So because the tough call is, "Hey, Jennifer, you did a really good job, but I'm not going to bring you." So the only way I feel good about that is I say, "But if you're interested, I'll try and help." And I do. And normally we can help that person find a job up here. Or
well, that's very kind of you, because that's not something I think pros normally hear when they get a no, is a "No, but I will help you." I don't think that's usually offered. So that's very kind. And also kind of shows people that maybe sometimes, even if it's not offered, you can still ask for it, Don't just take the no and be fine with it. Maybe go the extra.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And that's a good question. That's a good point. And like I said, now, number one, when I get those random emails with no real, they don't have any understanding. I answer them though, because, and I know, I'm sure a lot of pros who are busy maybe don't. I do. I say, "Hey, thanks for your interest. Unfortunately, we're full. Good luck." Now, if 1 or 2 of those people, once in a while I'll say, because I got some like last month, I go, as an FYI, these jobs are usually filled in February or March. Usually, that's it. I don't hear anything. But you just made a good point. If one of those people who I don't even know who they are reached out and said, "Thank you for that. Could you give me some advice?" Within reason, I'd be happy to. Because that's, part of it was because when I was the USPTA Florida first and then national president, your name and email are out there and people call you looking for help because they're in the association and they want to move to Florida, say, and they know you're a contact. Or when you're the national president, they have such and such. And, it takes some time, but I'd like to think that almost always I try and help them. If it's simply a matter of, hey, I don't know the answer to that, but my friend Jennifer Galhouse does. Then I'll reach out to you, hey, Jennifer, then I'll connect you. And then, I don't necessarily follow up. Hey guys, how did that go?
Right, how'd it go?
And it's just because, people helped me when I was younger too, for sure. So, because, like I said, going all the way back to the beginning of this conversation, I'm 20 years old. I'm at Florida State, and the club called and said, "We're letting this guy go. Would you consider taking the job?" And as I told you, I did. But I had to reach out to pros in the area and anyone who I had to own the pro shop. It was nuts for 21. So yeah, we do try and help you, and I think the industry as a whole. I know you have a lot of contacts. And, you can reach out to the different people in the Northeast where you are, in Florida where you are. I think tennis is pretty good like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think that clubs should be using search firms? They seem to be more popular now, and a lot of the new jobs that are opening up are through search firms. There's different ones now, but do you think that that's definitely the way to go for clubs? Do you think that is always the best fit, or what's your thoughts on that?
So that's a good question. And for the people listening, I think you mentioned at the beginning, I work at Waccabuc now in the summers, and I don't work on the ground at a club in the winters. So I do help Len Simmard, who a lot of people in this will know. He works for KKNW, and I don't work for KKNW, but I help Len on some selected searches. And for the people on the call or listening to the podcast, KKNW is the largest hospitality and search firm in the country, probably in the world. And they became that by hiring GMs at all the best clubs in the country, platinum clubs. Now, there are other players in that space, but KKNW is by far the biggest. And KKNW is Copland, Keebler, and Wallace. And Kurt Keebler, one of the principals, was the GM at Isleworth in Orlando, who I met him, 25 years ago when Len Simmard was the tennis director there. We both were tennis directors in Florida. And then, Kurt left the on the ground GM job to become one of the principals of that company. So they have a tremendous track record of country club executive search. It's only become more recent that they've been in the tennis director search, I think about 7 years. And again, I've only been helping Len for 2 years. My good friend Mark McMahon, who's affiliated with the USPTA and has a search firm as well, does it. And he and I are in contact, and we spoke about me actually helping him some too. I ended up helping Len a little bit. So it's a part-time thing for me. So the question though, is it better? And here's what I can tell you is they have the search firms have a tremendous reach. They have a tremendous data. They have a number of people who have either, gotten jobs through them or have applied for jobs through them, and it were great candidates that came in second or third. I believe that GMs, and of course this is anecdotally because I don't know, I believe that GMs believe in the search firms because for the most part, that's how they got their job. Like if you're the GM here, or if you're the GM at, I don't know, it doesn't matter, Bedford Golf and Tennis right around the corner. Or if you're the GM at a big club, Boca West in Florida, a huge club. Or any clubs we all can think of, Congressional in DC area, any clubs, Texas, wherever. The GM was hired normally through a search process. So he or she is comfortable. That's how I got this job. I know how thorough KKNW or maybe it's one of the GSI, or maybe it's a more specific one like Mark McMahon. I think it's called McMahon Careers. I know how deep KKNW has tremendous reach and does a great job. So it does seem like more and more of the director jobs are becoming search driven versus the club's committee. I got this job 25 years ago through an ad in the USPTA and winning the job with the tennis committee and the search committee. So my experience, and it's only anecdotally, and it's only being friends, with guys that are in the search business and seeing my peer group go through searches. And I went through a search to get Albany, quite frankly, when I went down to the Bahamas 9 years ago. So I got to do both. I got to do it and fill out all the forms and fill out the portfolio. I did the exact same thing that I help now people do and then go for so it seems like there's more, but again, it also could be because I hear about the ones that are being done by a search firm, whether it's, any of the ones I just mentioned. But I do know in the hospitality business, particularly GMs, they're really search driven. So I think that's starting to permeate down to golf directors, executive chefs, and tennis directors, or in this case, rackets directors now, because that's the other thing, of course, with pickleball and paddle platform up here in the Northeast, becoming so popular. It's racket directors now versus tennis directors.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I hadn't even thought about that, but that makes sense that it's kind of a cause and effect type of thing from the GMs coming from that kind of.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I think if you're a GM and your club has the budget, and you say, look, do I want to hand this over to my members? It's a big job here at my club. It's the rackets director is the rackets program is doing great because of like all rackets have been the last 5 years. And this is a big opening for me. I want to make sure I get this right. Do I want to do it myself? Maybe. Or do I want to turn it over to a search committee driven by my rackets chair? Maybe. Or do I want to use the similar way that I got this job, which is a search firm? And I think that's where a lot of the GMs choose that route or recommend it to their club or their committee, and that's where it goes. So it seems like it's becoming more and more popular, and my gut tells me that's at least one of the main reasons.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I just looked at the time and I'm like, oh, we've been talking for over an hour, and I just have one last question for you. I promise, and it's a fun one. It's just if you could share really quickly. What has been the Grand Slam moment of your life, which is, the highlight of your tennis life? I mean,
oh, this is good.
And the double bagel moment of your life, which is the one that's,
Wow. Now that's a great question. The highlight moment was, wow, that's a really good question. The highlight probably was getting my first job, maybe, because it's what set me on the path. I haven't really thought about it. That's a great question, because the first job set me on the path to what's been a lifetime in tennis, right? I mean, so probably the odd highlight was being that very young man who got the opportunity to go back to home, to Ormond Beach, to teach at Oceanside Country Club, which was the nice country club in town, which I used to ride my bicycle by when I was a young boy going to the beach. So probably the highlight moment was that, because it kicked it off. And again, there hasn't been too many double bagel lows, but I will. And
you didn't hit any kids in the face when you were teaching?
No, I did not. That would be, but I will say this, an interesting, odd one in a way, but I was at a club that was privately owned. It had been a developer. It was just a racket club, and they built a community around it, and then they sold it. And like a lot of things, the investors thought that they could do X when they really could do Y. And they actually hired me away from that first job. This is my second job. They hired me from Oceanside to go there. And I went because it was a step up, and it was a very active tennis club, and it had been bought by the previous pro and a group of investors who really didn't know what they were doing, and they overpaid. So while I wasn't the director, I was the head pro. The club had financial trouble and closed. So I was out of a job. And even though I knew it was struggling, I didn't know that it would close, right? And I believe I was engaged then. I'm not sure. But at the same time, a developer was developing a property called Plantation Bay, which was at that time a golf course and 10 clay courts, et cetera. And then it developed into 3 golf. It just got bigger and bigger. And I was chosen as their director. And I stayed there for 18 years. So the double bagel or the low, I got off my feet, and I got back on my feet and got back in the next tournament and did well. So
it always happens.
Yeah, it worked out.
You know, what is it that they say?
One door opens, or one door closes.
Exactly.
One door closes and one opens. Yeah, and that. But of course,
I believe that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do too. And I tell people that. And I in my role as I don't know, mentor of some people, and particularly in USPTA, I would tell people it may not seem like it right now because you just lost your job or this happened or that happened. And I go, and I can't say 100% because that wouldn't be true. I go, but really like 90% of the time I hear this, I go, Jennifer, I promise you in 6 months, you're going to be happier because something's going to happen. And it really is true 9 out of 10 times. The 1 out of 10, the person doesn't find the right thing or take the next job, which is less of a job, but it's just, but for the most part, that is true. So that's a good question because I hadn't thought about, but I think kicking off the career is the Grand Slam moment and kind of being part of that club failing, which the club did reopen, at a lesser price and this and that. And now it's still running as a tennis only club. It kickstarted me into more of the higher end too, from a tennis club to a country club community. Particularly, I got to design the facility and be part of it. So it all worked out.
Exactly. It always works out. That's the message. It always works out for the better.
Well, see, it does seem like it. And, I'm a pretty positive person. One of the things we talk about is being relentlessly positive. That's a little buzzword I have. But I'm not just saying that because, it isn't 100% of the time. I can't think of one off the top of my head where someone lost a job or something happened and then they never bounced up. They may have stayed sort of flatlined from that point, but those stories are much fewer than the ones I have where a man or woman, an acquaintance or a friend has something happen and they're thinking, oh man, I'm going to look, just stay the course. Stay positive, get out and exercise, do this, do that, start applying, and it works out. And almost always, 6 months later, they go, Harry, you were right, man, I got this gig. And I'm happy for them and happy that, it tends to go that way more than it doesn't.
Yes, I love that. Thank you so much for that. And I hope everyone listens to that and really takes that in, coming from someone with 100 years of experience, not calling you old, just you have all the experience in the world in this industry. So coming from you, coming from me, please take it in and really, truly believe that to the core. So, but thank you so much, Harry. Such an honor and so fun talking to you today. All the best this summer. I know you're already up there, ready to go for summer 2023. So fantastic.
Thanks, Jennifer. And it's funny, the time went by so fast until you hadn't even looked at it. But I love talking tennis. I love talking about our industry and service and things that I'm passionate about. So congratulations to you on this podcast. As I mentioned to you before we came on, I found it. I've listened to a couple already, and I wish you great success. And anything I can do to help, I'll be happy to.
Thank you so much, Harry. Wasn't that conversation fantastic? Do you have any light bulb moment while listening? Because I sure did. I hope you're getting use out of these conversations. This was officially my 14th Vita Tennis episode. There are so many interesting conversations for anyone who's in the tennis industry or just likes tennis. You know how we talked about feedback? I would love to get some from you. Let me know what you thought of this episode or any other episode by emailing me at vitatennispodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and until next time.